Your lungs do not fill with water when you drown. That chilling image, so often depicted in fiction, is a profound misunderstanding of the true horror. What truly occurs is far more primal, a desperate, suffocating battle as your body fights against the very element it needs for survival, paradoxically sealing its own fate. To understand this agonizing truth, we must journey back to a secluded lake in Bavaria, on a melancholic June evening in 1886, where a king, stripped of his crown and his sanity, was about to confront this terrifying physiological reality firsthand. King Ludwig II of Bavaria was no ordinary monarch. He was a dreamer, a man of profound artistic sensibility born into a world of cold political calculation. His palaces, Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee, were not mere residences but soaring testaments to a vivid imagination, a retreat into a realm of myth and beauty. He saw himself as a patron of the arts, particularly of Richard Wagner, lavishing vast sums on operas and fantastical castles, draining the royal coffers and neglecting the dreary affairs of state. He lived in a perpetual twilight of romanticism, preferring the solitude of his mountain retreats to the bustle of Munich, the company of servants to the council of ministers. He was the fairy tale king, a figure both revered and ridiculed, lost in his own operatic dramas while his kingdom yearned for a more grounded leader. But even a king's dreams have limits, especially when those dreams are financed by the public purse. His lavish spending had driven the royal family to the brink of financial ruin, accumulating debts that dwarfed the Bavarian treasury. His ministers, weary of his reclusiveness and erratic behavior, began to whisper of a deeper malady, something more than eccentricity. They saw a kingdom adrift, a monarch unfit to rule, and they began to plot his removal. Their solution was as drastic as it was cruel, a medical declaration of insanity. The wheels of this plot turned with devastating speed. A commission of 4 eminent psychiatrists, led by Dr. Bernhard von Gudden, was dispatched to examine the king. Yet, in a testament to the hurried and perhaps politically motivated nature of their assessment, none of them actually interviewed Ludwig. Their diagnosis was based entirely on the testimonies of his disgruntled servants and ministers, painting a picture of delusion, paranoia, and dangerous impulsivity. On June 8, 1886, they presented their findings. King Ludwig II was declared insane and incapable of governing. The crown, and his freedom, were to be seized. The following day, a delegation arrived at Neuschwanstein, the king's most magnificent and unfinished dream. Ludwig, initially defiant, even having the delegation arrested, eventually surrendered to the inevitable. The sheer weight of numbers, the betrayal by those he trusted, perhaps even a flicker of despair, broke his will. Under the cover of darkness, on the morning of June 12, he was spirited away from his beloved castle, the soaring turrets of Neuschwanstein fading into the dawn behind him. It was a journey he would never reverse, a dramatic, heartbreaking abduction that sealed his fate. His new residence was Berg Castle, a more modest royal estate nestled on the shores of Lake Starnberg. It was a place of enforced solitude, a gilded cage with a breathtaking view of the water and mountains, yet utterly devoid of the artistic freedom and grandiosity that fueled his soul. Guards patrolled the grounds, his every move was monitored. Dr. von Gudden, the very man who had orchestrated his downfall, was now his personal physician and custodian, tasked with observing and managing the dethroned monarch. The lake, once a symbol of serene contemplation, now became a stark reminder of his imprisonment. Did the king understand the implications of this final confinement? What thoughts must have raced through his mind, watching the ripples on the water, knowing his reign was over? Dr. Gudden, a respected and seemingly compassionate man, attempted to establish a rapport with his high-profile patient. He believed in the healing power of nature and encouraged Ludwig to take long walks around the castle grounds and along the lake's edge. It was a peculiar relationship, the deposed king and his keeper, both men of intellect, one stripped of power, the other wielding it with a paternalistic hand. On the evening of June 12, the very day he arrived at Berg, they took their first stroll together. It was a quiet, uneventful walk, lulling some into a false sense of security. But beneath the surface, the king's despair was deepening, his sense of captivity growing more profound with each passing hour. The following day, June 13, 1886, dawned cool and overcast. The air hung heavy with an unspoken tension. Ludwig, ever melancholic, seemed restless. He attended Mass, then spent the afternoon in his room, reading and gazing out at the lake. As evening approached, around 6 o'clock, he expressed a desire for another walk. Dr. Gudden, perhaps confident in his control, or perhaps genuinely believing it would soothe the king, readily agreed. Was there a premonition in the air? Did anyone notice the unusual glint in the king's eye, the subtle shift in his demeanor? They set out around 6:45 p.m., a little later than usual. The light was beginning to fade, casting long, distorted shadows across the path leading to the lake. The castle guards, despite their instructions to shadow the two men, somehow lost sight of them. The official narrative would later claim it was an oversight, a moment of negligence. But as the king and his doctor walked deeper into the encroaching twilight, along the secluded, tree-lined path that hugged the northern shore of Lake Starnberg, a profound sense of isolation must have enveloped them. The lapping of the waves against the shore would have been the only sound accompanying their footsteps, the only witness to their final, fateful journey. What happened next remains shrouded in mystery, a lacuna in history filled only by speculation and whispers. But the chilling reality of drowning, the physiological truth, almost certainly played out in those final moments. Whether Ludwig deliberately walked into the water to end his life, whether he attacked Dr. Gudden and both men struggled, or whether it was a tragic accident, the mechanics of death by submersion are universally brutal. The moment water entered the king's mouth and nose, a primal, involuntary reflex would have taken over. This is the horrifying truth the title alluded to. Your body, in its desperate attempt to survive, protects your lungs. As water enters the upper airways, the vocal cords spasm shut. This is known as a laryngeal spasm, and it's an involuntary muscular contraction. Your body, in that terrifying instant, believes it is safeguarding the delicate lung tissue from liquid invasion. But in doing so, it creates an impenetrable barrier, effectively sealing off the airway. No water can enter, but crucially, no air can enter either. You are suffocating, not from a flood within your lungs, but from the inability to get a single breath, your own body turning against you in a grotesque act of self-preservation. The result is silent asphyxiation. Instead of lungs filling with water, the air sacs within them collapse as the residual oxygen is rapidly consumed. Imagine the horror. Your brain, starved of oxygen, screaming for air, yet your throat is clamped shut by an involuntary reflex. You struggle, you thrash, your muscles deplete their last reserves of energy in a frantic, futile effort to draw breath. The world blurs, the cold water invades your senses, but the sensation of being utterly cut off from the life-giving air is paramount. There is no relief of inhaling water, there is only the agonizing, building pressure of absolute oxygen deprivation. Hours later, the castle staff, growing increasingly concerned by the men's prolonged absence, launched a search. Lanterns bobbed in the darkness, their beams cutting through the heavy mist that had descended upon the lake. Around 10:30 p.m., a courtier discovered Ludwig's hat and coat neatly folded on a bench by the shore. The worst fears began to materialize. Then, the grim discovery. The bodies of both King Ludwig II and Dr. Bernhard von Gudden were found floating in the shallow water, near a small bay known as Schwage. Ludwig's face was turned towards the shore. Gudden's lay nearby, bearing clear signs of a struggle. The world was stunned. A king, declared mad, was now dead, and his doctor with him. The official autopsy reports were quick, perhaps too quick given the political climate. Gudden's body showed signs of a struggle, including blows to the head and neck, suggesting a violent confrontation. Ludwig's body, however, bore no such external injuries. Crucially, the examination of his lungs revealed only a very small amount of fluid, consistent with what happens when a person dies from laryngeal spasm and asphyxia. The airways were not engorged, his lungs were not filled with water as the popular imagination still insists. The small amount of water found is often a secondary effect, seeping in after the initial spasm, or if the spasm relaxes in the final moments of unconsciousness. But the primary cause of death was undoubtedly the desperate fight for air, ending in oxygen starvation. This silent, terrifying process of asphyxiation, rather than the dramatic gurgle of lungs filling with water, is the horrifying truth of drowning. It's a death that speaks of the body's ultimate betrayal, its attempts to protect itself leading directly to its demise. The mystery of Ludwig II's death endures. Was it suicide, A king choosing to end his tragic existence in the waters he so loved? Was it murder, a desperate act by a man cornered and betrayed, leading to a struggle with his keeper? Or perhaps an accident, a fall into the frigid depths of the lake, followed by the terrifying, involuntary shutting down of his own airway? Regardless of the precise circumstances of his entry into the lake, the physical agony of his final moments would have been the same. It was a suffocating, airless death, a desperate struggle against an invisible enemy created by his own body's defense. The king's final breath was not one of release, but a final, agonizing gasp that failed to materialize, leaving him to succumb to the absolute void of oxygen. It's a chilling reminder that the true terrors are often less cinematic and far more insidious than we imagine. We cling to our myths, even about death, perhaps because the truth, in its raw physiological detail, is simply too horrifying to contemplate. The fairy tale king died, not with a heroic, water-filled gasp, but in the silent, suffocating grip of his own body's desperate, misguided fight for life. And the lake, so often a symbol of peace, held his final, terrifying secret within its cold, dark depths.